Your attention, masters, mistresses. All systems functional for the Everything Geek podcast.
Hey, this is Rich McDonald, and I play Commander David Mason on Call of Duty Black Ops 2. And you're listening to Everything Geek podcast.
Hey, it's James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi and
Master Plo Koon
in Star Wars The Clone Wars, and you're listening to Everything Geek, the podcast.
Hey, it's Leif Gaffert. I played Uncle Ben's killer in The Amazing Spider-Man, and you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast.
Hello, I'm Simon Fisherbecker. You probably know me better as Dorian Moldovar from Doctor Who, or the Fat Friar from Harry Potter. And this is Everything Geek podcast.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot with the Everything Geek podcast.
You're listening to the Everything Geek podcast, bringing you interviews from your favorite films and TV shows every week, and all of the latest news. Here's your host, Rory Williamson.
Hello everyone, you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast. I'm your host, Rory, and joining me are co-hosts Lawron.
Hello.
And Al.
Hey everyone.
And also joining us today is a very special guest. We have writer Jack C. Thomas, best known as one of the writers on Dragons Riders of Berk, Dragons Race to the Edge, The Fairly OddParents, The Replacements, Regular Show Turbo Fast, and Star Wars Detours. He was also an executive producer on The Replacements and Turbo Fast. Jack, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Very well, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you join us on the podcast.
Well, I apologize. I know we were trying to do it maybe a year ago, and I couldn't do it, so I'm happy to be on now.
Yeah, well, patience is everything after all, and you've been very patient while I've been delayed. Very unfortunate delays, but all for the good of our listeners with all the new articles on the website.
It's all for the people.
Exactly. Definitely, we have the exact same thinking. So getting right into my questions for you, Jack, my first question is, how did you decide you wanted to become a writer?
Well, I don't think I really did. I think it's I fell into it. I was doing stand-up comedy and had moved to Los Angeles, and I was at a pretty famous club called the Improv in Los Angeles, and ran into a friend of mine who was a comic who I hadn't seen for a while, and we got to talking, and he said, hey, I'm writing on this show called The Fairly OddParents. Do you want to submit some story ideas? And I said, sure, I'll submit one, and I submitted it, and they liked it, and they said, do you think you can write the episode? And I wrote the episode, and then a couple months later, they said, how would you like to be a staff writer? And so that's sort of how I got into it. It wasn't my goal, but it's been fun.
Definitely, you're definitely right, and it's a lot like with a lot of other jobs in the industry, including with some actors I've interviewed. Like they kind of feel like they fell into it, so it's really interesting to hear that it wasn't particularly something you were necessarily chasing all of the time. You just fell into it, happy coincidence kind of thing.
Well, I think when you're a stand-up comic, you're writing already. You're writing your own material, and what happens to most comics who end up in Los Angeles is you either continue performing, or if you're one of the lucky few, you become an actor, get on a show. But I would say the vast majority end up as writers because, people see us on stage and they know that we're funny and they know that we can write funny. And then the question then is, can we write funny for characters other than ourselves? And so it's not uncommon. And I'm leaving out, I did other little writing jobs before then. But that's how I got into animation writing.
That's great. So would you say there were any writers you looked up to that were like inspirations to you growing up?
Well, I can't say. I mean, I loved reading Mark Twain when I was a kid. When you were forced to read stories in school, Mark Twain's stuff was always great. I was a big sci-fi nerd, so Isaac Asimov was huge to me, and Ray Bradbury was huge to me. but that's all, short stories and novels for the most part. So it's, you don't really have somebody I look up to, TV writer or movie writer.
Very interesting. And of course, you mentioned that you first started writing on animated shows with the Fairly OddParents, but how were you originally hired to work on Dragon's Riders of Berk?
Well, that was funny. I was brought in, just my agent got me an interview with the two guys who were running the show, and they were interviewing basically 3 people for 2 spots, and they didn't pick me. But one of the executives at DreamWorks, a guy named Peter Gall, said, "Hey, you really are missing out. Jack Thomas is a good writer. If I can get you extra money in the budget, will you put this guy on the staff?" And, and then I was there from episode 13 all the way to, pretty much the end, which is episode 108 or something they're working on. I've moved on to a different show, but in the last 2 weeks, basically.
It's really interesting that you were originally hired not by the showrunners who we've had on the podcast and interviewed not too long ago, but that's really interesting, actually, because you've written a good number of great episodes I've really enjoyed on both Riders and Race to the Edge, the current show. It's interesting to think you almost didn't end up on the show.
Oh yeah, I didn't think I'd gotten it, and this exec has been, I'd known him from Nickelodeon, and we'd stayed in touch when I left Nickelodeon to go to Disney, and I have a pretty good story sense, and I think he knew that and knew that I'd be an asset, and I've really enjoyed it. If you've had Art and Doug on, you know that we probably have a pretty crazy writer's room, and we have a lot of fun making the show.
Definitely. Now, you mentioned 108 episodes. I'm curious, is that including both the Cartoon Network show and the Netflix version?
Yeah, they did 2 seasons of 20 for Cartoon Network, and I came on for the second 20 of those. But we were also, at the time, we rewrote one of the first season episodes, and we also were involved with punching them up, so I sort of count those. And then we will have done 78, maybe my count is wrong. We'll have done 78, 118 episodes? Yeah. So, and I've probably been involved with like 105 of them. By the time the entire series is done, they'll have done 78 episodes of Race to the Edge for Netflix.
Wow, that's really interesting, because I remember when Race to the Edge was originally announced, it was said it would be 4 seasons of 13 episodes. So it sounds like you went above 4 seasons.
Yeah, we are one of the few shows that they've ordered more of. Netflix plays it close to the vest with numbers and how you're doing, but they very clearly knew we were doing well enough that they wanted to get 2 more seasons of 13. So, which was great, because we didn't feel like we'd finished telling the story. We had a stopping point, and we left ourselves an out, which luckily then we were able to use. In the next 13, you'll see, we could have ended the series at the end of the next 13 that come out in the winter.
It's very interesting. Now I'll be looking forward to those 13 even more. So, obviously you've written a number of episodes on both Dragon shows. Is there a particular favorite episode or a few episodes that you have that you did?
Well, on the Cartoon Network show, I really loved an episode, I think it's called Iron Grunkle, which had the premise that Fishleg's dragon Meatlug had eaten some weird combination of rocks, and now when he barfed out his lava, it cooled to be this silver, lightweight, super strong element, and it was basically like titanium, I guess, and it made the best weapons because it was light and sturdy, and everybody wanted it. And now sort of the dumpy dragon was the most popular dragon in town, but then he realized he couldn't replicate it. And so he kept trying to feed him all these different combinations of rocks to see if he could make Grunkle iron again. And the result was that he actually ate something that made him magnetic, and then he's running through town, and all these weapons are being pulled at him magnetically, and it was just sort of a fun, goofy episode, and it was one of my favorites that I wrote early on.
Yeah, it's a really interesting choice because, like you said, it was a fun, goofy episode, when it was released, but the events of it are still very important now because every episode, not every episode, but every episode, like here and there, you do hear Gronkle Iron get mentioned. So,
Gronkle Iron becomes really important. The bad guys. Oh, I'm trying to think what's out. Yeah, this has been out. The bad guys get the recipe for Gronkle Iron, and they're making weapons out of it. And then when they are trying to make armor for their dragons at one point, that's the only arm or the metal that's light enough is Gronkle. Yeah, so it comes. That's one of the great things I think we do about the show is we seed these things in, and then we go back to them later, and it creates. I think we've created a really fun universe between the two that happens in between the two movies.
Definitely. Now, I have to ask out of curiosity as well, which characters do you find the most challenging and most enjoyable, respectively, to write for this show?
Well, Hiccup is really hard to write for because he's the hero. And, it's tough because Jay Baruchel, who plays the part, is such a funny actor. But heroes are normally heroic, not funny. And so it's always sort of tough to figure out ways to get humor into his character. The same is true to a large degree with Astrid because she's so forthright and honest and just wants to fight all the time. So she's a little hard to write for. The easiest characters are clearly Tough Nut because T.J. Miller is just such a funny actor. And that he's going to take the material and play with it. And I love writing for Dagur, the bad guy who may or may not have turned good, just because he's crazy, and writing crazy is fun.
It's a really good answer. I like all of your choices. And it's especially interesting how you mention Hiccup and Astrid as being difficult, because some people may find the main characters to be the easiest to write for, but it's really not the case because you have to really flesh them out anyway, even if they're on screen so much as well.
Well, and because he's the hero of the entire franchise, it's honestly hard to convince the powers that be, the execs, that you can give him flaws once in a while because he's the hero. But, a heroic journey always involves making mistakes and having a few flaws. So we've been able to work them in here and there. And just, writing for a perfect person is tough because they're perfect.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, it's the flaws that make characters interesting. I mean, if Deadpool didn't wisecrack, if he was like the perfect hero, he wouldn't be Deadpool. He wouldn't be fun to watch, in the key moments. And the really tough thing is we all know Jay Baruchel is really super funny. So, he gets a lot out of what we give him, but it's, I wish we could have made him, I wish we could have dirtied him up a little bit more in the process of making this series.
Yeah, well, that's definitely very interesting. Maybe we will see him a bit dirtier at some point, but we'll have to wait and see. So, of the most recent 13, the final episode in the most recent 13 was Defenders of the Wayne Part 1. And you wrote that particular episode, and it ended on a cliffhanger. I mean, even before I'd watched the most recent 13, I just scanned through the episode titles, and I saw the last one was Defenders of the Wayne Part 1, and I'm like, they're ending it on a cliffhanger. Like, they're just totally giving us a cliffhanger and making us wait for 6 months. So, my question...
Part 1 is the giveaway.
It really was. And so my question was, how early on in the writing process did you decide to end it on a cliffhanger, and were you aware at the time you wrote the episode that it was the final one of this 13?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So what normally happens, you get your order and it's 26 episodes, right? And so you go, all right, we're going to we're going to have sort of maybe a major storyline that's going to arc through the first 13. And then, we'll have some significant change or event that will happen at 13 that will resolve in 14 that'll carry us through. So we know right away that we're gonna have a big moment in 13, not necessarily cliffhanger, but something significant is going to happen. And then, as it turns out, because when we were plotting out the entire season, we thought about the idea of making, the end of 13 revealing this tribe of people who worship dragons, and then have 14 be about, how do we interact with them? But it just, as it worked out, it was easier to introduce them earlier, to make them part of this overall plot by Vigo.
That's really interesting, and obviously it's very interesting as well because I've watched some of the fan reactions as well to the cliffhanger, and it's really interesting. I mean, were you ever worried when writing the cliffhanger, is what I wanted to know, about the fan reaction? Because, of course, a lot of the characters, the movie characters, they can't die, so were you ever worried that you didn't have a big plan in mind for 14?
Well, yeah, here you've run into one of our big narrative problems, which is everybody knows those characters are going to be in the movie, right? So we're never going to we can't kill off one of them unless they have an identical twin, which you never know, you might see. But so in that sense, the I'm going to kill you hiccup thing is a bit of a false cliffhanger, right? Because they're not going to kill anybody. They might kill somebody you don't know, or somebody who isn't in the movie, like Heather isn't in the movie, Dagur isn't in the movie. There are characters who are expendable, but obviously you're right as rain. We can't kill somebody who is going to show up in the second movie.
Yeah, it just makes it a lot tougher, of course, as well. And because then if you can't kill them, if you do kill someone like Heather or whoever in 14, people would be expecting that. So it's a very difficult position to be in.
Right. And we also are cognizant of the fact we're doing a show for, teens and preteens. And so, we're probably not going to kill too many people, but we might kill some people, but I'm not going to say, I can't say anything more, really. Yeah. That would be spoiler territory.
Yeah, it's very commendable. Yeah, I won't want you to go into spoiler territory any more than you want to. But speaking of character deaths, though I maybe should say death in, quote unquote, who knows? We'll find out. So you also wrote the season 3 episode Family on the Edge, where Dagur the Deranged was seemingly killed off. How early on in writing the episode did you decide to kill him off, or was it the showrunner's idea to kill him off?
That was mine. The way our writing process works, we pitch like just a basic idea. So I think maybe not. I wrote the story and the outline for the first episode where Dagur is sort of, maybe you realize, maybe he's redeeming himself a little bit. And then I came up with this idea of what if he comes back and Hiccup has to try to hide him from everybody. And it was totally my pitch that, he sacrifices himself for everybody else. He's done some horrible things, and, maybe he isn't totally redeemable, but, there's also the chance that maybe that was all a trick, and that he wasn't really sacrificing himself. He was warning everybody. But it does appear that he's gone down in a blaze of glory. A funny story, or maybe not funny. I have a 7-year-old daughter who was watching that in the car and burst into tears when he died. So, and my wife just punched me and said, "What have you done?" So, yeah. There may be things that come up about that character in the future, but I really liked that idea that he sacrificed himself, and nobody really believed it. And my favorite part is right at the very end where Hiccup says to Heather says, I know my brother, he would never sacrifice himself. He thought he could make it out. And Hiccup says, wow, that's the first time I've ever heard you call him your brother. And, that was just, to me, that was like, you write lines like that every once in a while and you just go, yes, this is the line, this is the emotion. And so I'm very proud of that episode. That might be my favorite episode I've ever written of the show.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite episodes anyway. I can't say I blame your wife for punching you.
Well,
I'm just joking,
character.
Obviously.
And David, no, she was right to punch me. Sometimes I'm a jerk. But David Faustino, who played Dagur, is a really great actor, a really fun voice actor. And so, you never love it when a guy's going to read that his character dies in the script. But he's been very game about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's just one of the worst things. Like, that's one reason I would never want to be an actor or voice actor. Just reading that my character is going to die, I'd be like, it's like a part of me is dying.
Yeah, it's like those guys on Walking Dead or Game of Thrones. Let's see. Oh, the script came. Oh, what? What? I'm stabbed by who? I'm bit by what? Yeah, it's got to be a tough life being an actor. My wife is a casting director. She casts television shows, and the story she tells about the casting process and how actors get hired and replaced on like whims sometimes just are mortifying. I'm glad I'm not an actor.
Definitely. So Dagur is definitely dead?
I did not say that. I might be just using the past tense verbs to throw off people who are listening to the podcast.
Yeah, which would be very wise of you to do so. So, my final question for you, Jack. Do you have any upcoming writing works or any other projects coming up that you would like to talk about?
Well, upcoming, I've left Dragons. They're writing the last 5 episodes of the series, and Netflix has put me in charge of a new series that I can't say anything about, other than that it's aimed at younger kids, which is something new for me. I've never done sort of the 8-year-old shows for 8-year-olds. I've always done 10 or teen or a little bit older. But I'm excited. It's going to be a fun show. It's going to be not anywhere as dark as Dragons got. And so that's going to be fun. And, I'm always hoping against hope that someday Star Wars Detours will come out and people will see that work, but who knows? So, but that's what I'm doing now. I'm running another different show for DreamWorks.
It's really great. Well, I'm definitely curious to find out more about that show for Netflix, so looking forward to finding out about that. So thank you for answering all of my questions, Jack. I'll let my co-host Lawron ask his now.
Great.
All right, well, I've just got a few questions here for you, Jack. So this question might be a little obvious, and the answer might be obvious as well, but just in case it's not what we think, which has been your favorite project to write for, and why?
Wow, that's tough. I don't know that I have a favorite. I mean, Fairly OddParents, the first show I worked on, I loved working on that show because it was a show about what I thought was as cartoony and over the top as it was. It was about a real kid. Timmy was not a hero in that show. He was like, if you gave the average kid 2 fairies who could grant him anything he wanted, he would try to meet the pretty girl. He would try to do all these crazy things. He wouldn't try to end world hunger. And so I loved working on the show because it was to me just super over the top. Nothing was out of bounds, so I love that show. I love my show that I ran for Disney that nobody's ever heard of, called The Replacements. It did 52 episodes and vanished, but I loved the cast and the crew, and one of the voices on the show was Nancy Cartwright, who was also the voice of Bart Simpson, and that was super fun for me because I went to college with Nancy Cartwright, and we'd known each other for a long time, so to get to work together later was really fun. The Star Wars thing, how can you not love going up to Skywalker Ranch and being in the room with George Lucas? I mean, that was just, insanely fun on that level. And I love science fiction, and that's the closest to pure science fiction I've ever been able to do. And God, I'm not picking a favorite, am I? I love the Dragon show too, because again, we got to do some really groundbreaking stuff, and we had this great technical team who we would go to and go, can we have oh no, that's a spoiler. Can we have a dragon that well, I'll just give you a hint. Can we have a dragon that reaches up and pulls people from under the sand down into the sand to his lair? And they go, yeah, it's going to be impossible, but we'll figure out a way to do it. So you might see something like that in the future. I'm not saying that you will, but possibly you might. So I loved them all for different reasons. I don't, there's an awe factor to working on Star Wars with George Lucas that I guess maybe surpasses the others. But again, that show, who knows if we'll ever see that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. It's a heartfelt answer. You were honest.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest here, not in my writing.
Okay.
That's the opposite of the truth. Writing is all about honesty. It's all about real emotions just placed into fictional characters.
Yeah, that's very true. I actually heard that. I heard that same statement said by my film teacher. So I know that's definitely a fact.
Oh my God, I thought I made that up. Gosh darn it.
And my next question for you: were you a fan of Dragons Riders of Berk prior to working on the show?
Absolutely not. Had never heard of it. I knew there'd been a movie, but I hadn't seen the movie. And so when I was set up for the interview, I immediately went and bought the movie and watched it. And it's phenomenal. That first How to Train Your Dragon movie is phenomenal. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I do want to work on this show, because you're always a little afraid in kids' television that it's going to be something really, sort of dancing teddy bears or something. And
yeah.
Something you're not going to sink your teeth into. But man, this was this great story about this kid who didn't fit in, and in the end he has a metal leg, and so I loved that first movie when I watched it. So I was excited to be on board, and I was excited to work on the show.
I would imagine that first movie. Oh my gosh! When I first saw it, it was spectacular. I know exactly what you're saying, and even the second movie was fantastic as well.
Well, yeah, they have such a budget, to make these big effect shots where there are, 50 dragons moving at once in a big battle, which we could never do in television. And so much of it is beautiful, and and they're willing to take some risks. They can move the story ahead more. They can, basically kill people if they want to. Man characters, which is something we can't, and they can set higher stakes. So yeah, I mean, I think those guys who make the movies are, they've done a really great job.
That's awesome. And my next question for you: are you a fan of any other TV shows or movies, and if so, which ones?
Well, again, I'm a sci-fi guy, so you can't get me away from Doctor Who. You can't get me away. I watched this show, and I don't know if it's over there, called The Last Ship on TBS, about a worldwide pandemic, and this one Navy ship maybe has the cure. I watched Walking Dead for a long time, and then I got a little too just burned out on people I like getting killed. Sherlock is to die for. Those guys are brilliant. What else? I guess I used to watch Person of Interest, but that's over. The sci-fi show about sort of computers running the world. I don't know. Just I mean, and I watch Legends of Tomorrow, but the superhero. If it's got any element of science fiction, I'm at least going to give it a try.
That's understandable. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, it's such a great, it's a fun type of the world is better or worse than it is type of fiction. And so when you have those two extremes, you can put characters through such, great, pressures. So.
Yeah, that's an excellent answer. And my last question for you, as a writer, what advice would you give to anyone looking to get into writing for TV shows?
I think the number one piece of advice that I would give is that it's not really advice, but I'll just say anyone can write when they feel like it. When inspiration hits and you get on the dragon and you ride the dragon till it ends, and that's great. And when you're like writing your screenplay on your own or writing your whatever spec scripts on your own, you can work that way. But you need to understand that if you're going to be a professional writer, especially in television, you have to write every day, whether you feel like it or not. Whether your wife is, you're arguing with your wife, or your kid isn't feeling well, or your car broke down, or you're sick, you still have to write. And you might as well get in that habit now of making yourself write when you don't feel like it, because that's going to be if you get into the business, if you're lucky enough to get that break and then hang into the business, that's what you're going to have to do. So don't just write when you feel like writing. Make a time, or just make it a goal to write, even if it's just a page a day. I mean, if you wrote a page a day, you could finish a screenplay in 90 days. I mean, you got to force yourself to do it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's an awesome answer. My brother, he's right. He's trying to get into basically what you're doing. And I always try and ask that question to anyone who's a writer, and it's funny, they all have very different answers, but they all seem to relate back to the same thing. You have to basically do it every day, and you have to keep pushing at it, and just if you want it, go get it,
Yes, and that is the truth. And I'll tell you one other, I'll give you a more pragmatic tip. If you're writing and you're really stuck on a scene, and just write the bad version of it to get past it. Just don't, your words aren't precious, because writing is rewriting anyway. And so just write the bad version of it. Write the worst dialogue you can think of. Write placeholder or joke to be written later. Write in the script and get past it to the things that you know that you can write. Then when you come back through and you read it, editing is so much easier than writing. So my pragmatic advice is write the bad version of the scene if you're stuck and move on. So there you go. I have two pieces of advice.
That's awesome. That's a really, really interesting technique. Even for myself, I kind of want to try that out. I'm not necessarily a writer, but I write basically poems, and I'm writing a book right now, but nothing anywhere close near to a screenplay or anything like that. But that's still great advice.
Yeah, it's sometimes you get so caught up in getting that perfect word. Don't worry about perfect. Worry about finish. Then make it perfect when you edit it.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And before I turn you over to our co-host, Al, he has a few questions for you. But I just got to say, I actually have seen The Replacements. I had to Google it to remember, but I've seen it, and I love that show. That show is brilliant. I grew up on that show.
Oh, well, thanks. It was conceived by this guy named Dan Santat, who is now like a award-winning children's book author. And it was such a crazy idea. The original idea was that these two orphans could replace their parents every day if they needed to. Oh my gosh, we need to go on a field trip. Well, my parents today suck at that, so I'll hire a Boy Scout camp counselor to be my parents for the day. And Disney thought that was just so radical, and they were probably right. So then we just gave them this idea that they have this phone and they can hire whatever expert they need to replace their baseball coach or their teacher or their camp counselor. And we had a lot of fun with it. I had a very creative crew. All my writers have moved on to better jobs in writing. And it wasn't the prettiest show, but it was sort of intentionally, the characters were sort of ugly, but we had fun with it. And the great thing was, when you know that you're not going to get picked up for another season early on, you stop getting notes from executives that are that in depth. So the last 8 episodes, we could pretty much do whatever we wanted. And we actually got to write a finale for the show where they actually went and found out why they were given these special phones that allowed them to call. And that was actually very freeing. It was, I loved that element of that show.
That is
I'm glad
awesome.
somebody's seen it.
No, when you said that, I was like, that sounds so familiar, and I googled it right away, and I was like, oh my gosh, I remember this. I used to watch this all the time as a kid. Coming home from school, it'd be on. So that's awesome.
You're the only one, because the second season, they literally were showing it, our premiere episodes, during the school day. So most kids would still be in school when it was on. So maybe it was just, but I love doing it.
So,
and it's fun to work for Disney. You know, they have such a history.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jack, for answering all of my questions. I'll let our co-host Al ask his now.
All right, Al.
Hey, Jack. Thanks again for joining us. Just got just a few questions. I was quite curious on the dragons and seeing what episode you found most challenging, and if you can just share that with us and why.
The most challenging episode for me has not aired yet, but I will just tell you that it was. You'll know when you see it. It's basically just Hiccup and Toothless stranded on an island, and the hardest part for me was to figure out, because Toothless doesn't talk, right? But he does sort of understand the emotions. He can read the emotions on Hiccup's face. So the hard part for me was how much dialogue could you realistically give Hiccup talking to his dragon to describe things that were going on that maybe the audience wouldn't be clear from animation. Oh, we're stuck on this island and something appears to be hunting us. And so how much talking out loud could he do? And I have to say, this was probably the worst script I've ever written for that show, in the sense that I think I got the plot totally right, but I never really got the balance of the dialogue right. And Art and Doug really had to go in and sort of take it over and rewrite the dialogue for me. And thank God they did, because it was just, for some reason, I was just not getting it. Some days you just, you give it up and you just go, I guess I thought it was good when I turned it in. I've never turned it in thinking it's bad, but they rewrote it so much, and I could see as they rewrote it that I wasn't getting the balance right. So that was the hardest episode I think I ever wrote on that show.
Wow, yeah, when there's not a lot of dialogue going on and a lot of emotions, it could be a big challenge, and it leaves rooms to just see where you can sort of pick up yourself upon. So
right.
It'll be really interesting to see episodes like that.
Yeah, this is a very much different episode. It's because it is literally just Hiccup and Toothless and whatever is trying to kill them for the whole episode.
Yeah. I guess, my next question would be, aside from dragons, what are your hidden passions or work that people might find, might be quite surprised to hear about you?
Oh, gosh. What I would love to do? You mean like writing or creatively, or?
Yeah. Anything that people might not know, or yeah.
Well, I think I love science fiction, and I really wanted to be. I was so excited to be involved with Star Wars, and so I really wanted that project to sort of push me more into science fiction. It'll come out and people will see it, and I go, oh, let's get that guy to write some science fiction for us, Jack Thomas, because look, he wrote 4 of those, and that never happened. And it's always been my passion to write some pure sci-fi TV or movie, or maybe even a book. I've been thinking I have an idea for a book. That seems such a daunting task to me to write a book. Just seems like, oh my God, just so complicated. So that's my hidden passion, science fiction.
A science fiction book.
Yeah, a science fiction book.
Awesome. Thank you. Those are all my questions. I'll just hand you over to you. Oh my God,
that was so easy. You're my favorite.
Ruari, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm back, and I didn't make it at all easy for you earlier, so it's just as well Al did.
No, hey, this has been really fun. You guys ask actually really insightful questions. And the last podcast I did was It was more like, well, what was it like to meet George Lucas? And of course, it was great and everything. But you guys ask like interesting questions about the show and interesting questions about writing, and I love that.
I have to ask, were they an hour late?
Well, it was actually a guy I know, so I went over to his house and we did it at his. So he couldn't be an hour late. I think I might have been late.
That's really funny. That's all of our questions for you today, Jack. It's been a pleasure talking to you on the podcast.
Oh, it's been great talking to you guys. I hope you enjoy the next season of Dragons. I think it's probably November, December it will come out. There'll be some surprises, some big surprises. I can't say what they are.
It's very nice. I was actually thinking it might be January next year they come out, because it's been every 6 months, really. And
I think we're ahead of schedule production-wise, and they might try to drop us before the end of the year. But I think you are right. We did come out in January this year, right?
Yeah, January, and then the most recent 13 was July, I think, or June. So
it was June. It was definitely June. We had a little party, and we always celebrate when they come out.
Yeah. So maybe it's December after all. All I know is the sooner I have more dragons in my life, the better.
Well, from your voice to God's ear. I don't even know what that saying means, but it seems appropriate. Yeah, hey, it's a great show, and I sort of wish they would do more of them. We're sort of hamstrung because we had to happen before the second movie. If they would let us do, there's so many stories we could tell after the second movie about Hiccup, trying to become chief and stuff. But as far as I know, there's no plans after these 78 to do more. But you never know. DreamWorks has been bought by Universal.
Yeah, I did hear about that.
And which we're all really excited about on the TV side. I think it's going to be great for us because they don't do anything like we do in TV animation. And so we'll be interested to see what they want to bring to the party, whether they want to, keep certain brands alive and get them in the amusement parks. And so many times that's the sort of thing that fuels extra episodes is, well, if we keep the franchise alive, then we can build a Dragons, themed ride. And so we'll see. But if they do more, I won't be on the show.
That would be excellent, though, if they did a How to Train Your Dragon theme park or amusement ride or whatever.
Yeah, it just seems like it's perfect for, one of those 3D motion rides, like the Harry Potter thing. And so.
Definitely. Hopefully we can talk to you on the podcast again at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. This was really very fun and effortless, and you're good guys.
Thank you very much for the kind words. We'll talk to you again soon. Take care and bye.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
So that's it for this week's show. Make sure to check out our podcast links. Check out our website, website.everythinggeekpodcast.com/EGP. Check out our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/everythinggeekpodcast. Check out our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/user/everythinggeekcast. Check us out on Twitter, twitter.com/everythinggeekp. Check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/official-everythinggeekpodcast. Check out our Mixcloud profile, www.mixcloud.com/everythinggeekpodcast. Email us at the following email, everythinggeekpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our companion podcast, Everything Geek Comiccast, www.facebook.com/everythinggeekcomiccast. Make sure to check out the hosts' YouTube channels. Mine is www.youtube.com/user/Cephalus Destroyers. Ron's is www.youtube.com/user/StarLegend9595. Check out Al's Twitter, twitter.com/mygurma. Check out Jack C. Thomas on Twitter, twitter.com/xlawyer. And check out Channel 138 we broadcast live from, www.channel138.com, So geeks out, everyone.
Look at it as darker. We look at it as being edgier, but at the same time, we think that it's also much funnier. So it's sort of across the board that when you raise the stakes and raise the level of storytelling,
is the one that's my favorite. And with projects, though, it's a little tougher to say that because some you definitely love, and others you kind of go, okay, looking at the clock, waiting for it to end. But I have been just, again, so blessed.